Tonight, you will hear stories that have been told for thousands of years, stories from the many past lives of the Buddha himself, stories that lead us back to the deepest peace within. I'm going to share with you 10 stories from the Buddha's past lives, stories that have helped countless people gently lay down the burdens in their hearts, quiet the restless thoughts in their minds, and enter a truly peaceful sleep. Each story is a gentle key, unlocking your natural ability to let go of worry, anger, and regret. They help you remember how to breathe, how to soften, and how to return to the peace that is already inside you. And what makes these stories different is that they can help you even if you've never meditated before, even if your mind feels busy, even if you've tried many ways to sleep but still find yourself lying awake at night. The Buddha once said, "Even if you wander the world, you will not find peace unless your mind is calm." In this next hour, you will understand what these words truly mean, in the most gentle and quiet way. As you listen to the stories of a brave golden deer, a small rabbit who knew how to give, or a monkey king who loved his people, you will notice something beautiful happening. Tension will begin to melt away, your thoughts will start to slow down, and your body will gently slip into a state of true rest. So, take a moment to get comfortable now. Adjust your pillow. Let your body rest against your bed, your mat, or your chair. Take one deep breath with me, and as you exhale, smile softly, because in this very moment, you have already begun your journey back to peace, a journey that has been waiting for you for a very long time. Now, let us begin with our first story. One day, while the Buddha was staying at Jetavana Monastery, a young monk approached him with a troubled heart. "Venerable Buddha," the monk said softly, "I often feel fear when I walk alone for alms, or when I pass through the quiet forest, or when I hear harsh words from others. How can I live without fear, with a calm heart and compassion in every step?" The Buddha looked at the young monk with kind, steady eyes, and with a gentle smile, he said, "Long ago, in one of my past lives, I learned how to face fear with love and courage. Let me share this story with you. Long ago, in a green forest where early morning light painted soft golden patterns on the forest floor, a herd of deer lived peacefully near a clear, flowing stream. Among them was a beautiful golden deer, who was none other than the Buddha in a past life. This golden deer had calm, kind eyes that shone like stars in the night sky, and every step it took was gentle yet steady, carrying within its heart a deep love for all beings. Each morning, the golden deer would lead the young fawns to the stream for water, then guide them to meadows of fresh, tender grass. Under its guidance, the herd lived in harmony, without quarrels or fear, always staying close to one another in trust. But one day, in a nearby city, a king commanded his hunters to enter the forest and set traps for deer, preparing for a great feast. As darkness fell, snares were laid across the narrow forest paths where the deer often walked. The next morning, while dew still clung to the leaves and the sun had not yet pierced through the canopy, a young fawn was caught in a trap. Its sharp, desperate cries broke the silence of dawn, spreading fear through the herd. The other deer, terrified, scattered, their eyes wide with panic, hearts pounding, breaths quick and shallow as fear wrapped around them like a cold wind. The young fawn trembled, tears in its eyes, not knowing when the hunter would come to take its life. It thought of its mother, of mornings spent leaping through fields damp with dew, of the sweet taste of tender grass in the breeze. Now, all of that seemed about to disappear, replaced by fear. The golden deer stood still, watching quietly. Its heart ached as it heard the cries of the young fawn. It knew that if the hunter came, the fawn would surely die. But if the herd only ran away, fear would forever remain in their hearts. Then, in the soft stillness of dawn, the golden deer walked toward the trap. Its gentle eyes met the frightened eyes of the fawn, as if to say, "Do not be afraid." The young fawn looked back, tears still glistening on its cheeks, its body trembling. The golden deer lowered its head, trying to bite through the rope of the trap, but it was too strong to break. The deer realized there was only one way to save the young fawn, to exchange its own freedom for the fawn's life. That morning, when the hunter arrived, he was astonished to see the golden deer in the trap, while the young fawn stood beside it, shaking, unable to run away. The hunter looked into the deep, clear eyes of the golden deer and saw no anger, no fear, only a calm peace. like a quiet lake reflecting the sky. He returned to the king and told him what he had witnessed. The king listened, and something stirred within his heart. A deer had offered its life to save another. A deer had faced fear with love. The next day, the king and his attendants went into the forest to find the golden deer. As the king looked into its eyes, he felt a profound peace washing over him, cleansing him of his greed and harshness. The king knelt down, removed the trap, and said, "Gentle deer, today you have taught me something precious. True courage is not in defeating enemies, but in loving and protecting others, even at the cost of one's own life." Oh, from that day forward, the king decreed that no hunting would be allowed in that forest, allowing all living beings to live there in peace. After finishing the story, the Buddha looked at the monks and said, "Dear monks, fear cannot be removed by running away from it. Only with love, courage, and a compassionate heart can fear truly be overcome." This story of the golden deer is not merely an ancient tale. It is a true story from one of the Buddha's past lives, when he practiced compassion and selfless courage as a bodhisattva. It reminds us that in our own lives, when we face fear of criticism, fear of failure, fear of loss, fear of loneliness, we can pause, take a deep breath, and learn to face it with love instead of running away. When you learn to love, you become strong. When you are willing to sacrifice for goodness, fear dissolves, and in that moment, you will live a life of true peace, freedom, and gentle happiness. One morning, while the Buddha was staying at Jātaka monastery, a group of lay followers came to him and asked, "Venerable Buddha, we want to do good, to give, to help others, but many times, because we are poor and have little to offer, we feel we are not capable of giving, and this makes us sad. How can we practice generosity when we have so little to give?" Hearing this, the Buddha smiled gently, his eyes calm and kind. Then, in a soft, steady voice, he said, "Dear friends, it is not only when one has wealth that one can give. In the past, when I was a small rabbit living in the forest, I learned that giving does not depend on what you have, but on the heart that is ready to love and share." Listen carefully to this story. Long ago, in a quiet, green forest where birds sang softly each morning and the leaves danced gently in the breeze, there lived a small white rabbit with fur as soft as morning clouds, with bright, kind eyes and a heart always ready to help others. Though the little rabbit was not as strong as the tiger, not as swift as the deer, or as clever as the monkey, it was loved by all the animals because of its kindness. Whenever the squirrel could not reach tender leaves, the little rabbit would gently pull the branch lower. When the sparrow was thirsty, the rabbit would share the dew it had found in the grass. Every act was small, but each was done with sincerity and warmth. One day, the 4 heavenly kings decided to test the hearts of the creatures in the forest. One of them transformed into an old, frail beggar, wearing tattered clothes, with tired eyes, and entered the forest, softly calling out, "Dear creatures of the forest, I have traveled many days without food, and my body is weak and hungry. Is there anyone who could share something to save me from hunger?" Hearing the beggar's plea, the animals of the forest brought what they had. The squirrel brought the nuts it had saved, the monkey offered sweet, ripe fruits, the deer brought tender green leaves, and the sparrow came with small, juicy berries. The beggar smiled, touched by the kindness of the animals. Then it was the little rabbit's turn. The rabbit looked around, then down at its empty paws. It had no nuts, no fruits, no leaves to offer. A soft sadness passed through the rabbit's eyes because it could not give anything to help the hungry beggar. But then, the little rabbit lifted its head, its eyes clear and calm, shining with quiet determination. It realized that even if it had nothing, it still had the most precious thing to offer, itself, and its willingness to give. The rabbit stepped closer to the beggar and, in a quiet but clear voice, said, "I have no nuts, no fruits, no leaves. I have nothing to give, but I offer you my own body, so that you may live." Saying this, the little rabbit walked toward the small fire the beggar had lit to keep warm, ready to leap into the flames to offer its body as food. At that very moment, the beggar revealed himself as the heavenly king, smiling with kindness, raising his hand to stop the rabbit, his eyes filled with deep compassion. "Dear little rabbit, your compassion and willingness to give are brighter than any gift in this world." Oh. The heavenly king bowed before the rabbit, blessing it, and promised to place the image of the rabbit on the moon, so that for all eternity, whenever people looked up at the full moon, they would see the rabbit there, reminding them of the power of compassion and the beauty of giving without expecting anything in return. And so, even today, the image of the rabbit on the moon continues to remind us of the heart that is always ready to give, no matter how little one has. After telling this story, the Buddha looked at the lay followers, his eyes gentle, and said, "Dear friends, giving is not measured by the value of what is given, but by the heart that is willing to give. Even a smile, a kind word, or simply listening with love is a form of giving. No matter how poor you are, if your heart is open, you can help others." This story of the little rabbit is one of the Buddha's own past lives, when he practiced the path of a bodhisattva, cultivating compassion, generosity, and selfless giving. It reminds us that we do not need to have much to give. With a loving heart, we can bring light to someone else's day. Even with the smallest gesture, there may be times in life when you feel helpless or unable to help someone you care about. But remember, your calm presence, a gentle smile, a sincere word of encouragement, or simply being there for someone can be the greatest gift. And in giving, you will discover a deep peace and joy quietly blooming within your own heart. One early morning at Jātaka monastery, as a gentle breeze moved through the trees and birds sang softly, a young monk approached the Buddha and knelt before him. "Venerable Buddha," the monk said quietly, "I have been asked to guide the younger monks in meditation and in keeping the precepts, but sometimes I lose my patience. I speak with a harsh tone, and I see fear in their eyes. I am afraid I do not have enough compassion to lead others. Please, teach me how to lead with love." The Buddha looked at the monk with kind, steady eyes, and in a calm, warm voice, he said, "Dear monks, it is not only strict words or power that help others follow. In the past, when I was a monkey king, I learned that the best way to lead is with love and wisdom." The Buddha paused for a moment and then began to share this story. Long ago, in a vast green forest, there stood a towering fig tree with branches that stretched wide, its thick trunk so large that 4 people could not wrap their arms around it. Each season, the tree bore sweet, ripe figs that would fall onto the ground and into a river that ran beneath it, filling the air with a gentle, sweet fragrance. In this tree lived a troop of monkeys, led by a wise and kind monkey king, who was none other than the Buddha in a past life. The monkey king was strong and agile, with bright, clear eyes and a gentle smile. His hands were quick but never used to harm. Instead, he used them to gather fruit for the elderly monkeys, for the mothers, and for the playful young ones. Under his care, the monkeys lived in harmony, sharing food and looking out for one another without fighting or fear. One day, some of the sweet figs fell into the river and floated downstream to the kingdom of a human king named Brahmadatta. As he walked along the river, the king saw the figs glistening in the sun, tasted one, and was enchanted by its sweetness, unlike anything he had tasted before. Curious, King Brahmadatta sent his men to follow the river upstream to find the source of these delicious fruits. When they discovered the great fig tree and the troop of monkeys living among its branches, the king felt greed rise in his heart. He wanted the tree and all its fruit for himself, and decided to capture the monkeys and take them back to his palace. Under the cover of night, King Brahmadatta's soldiers quietly surrounded the tree, preparing to capture the monkeys at dawn. High up in the tree, the Monkey King was meditating, listening to the breath of the forest. His sharp ears caught the faint rustle of leaves and the quiet movements of soldiers below. And as he looked down, he saw the torches flickering in the darkness. He understood that if he did not act, his entire troop would be captured. Looking across the river, the Monkey King saw a dense forest on the other side, a place where his troop could find safety. But the river was wide and its current swift, too dangerous for the young monkeys and the elderly to cross. Taking a deep breath, the Monkey King felt a deep love and responsibility for his troop. He was ready to give everything to protect them. Climbing to the highest branch, the Monkey King leapt across the river, grasping onto a sturdy branch on the other side. But the distance was too far for the others to cross. Thinking quickly, the Monkey King tore a strong vine from the tree, tied it around his waist, and fastened the other end to the fig tree. Using his own body, he stretched across the river, becoming a living bridge so that his troop could escape to safety. One by one, the monkeys woke up and saw their king stretched across the river, forming a bridge with his body. They understood this was their path to freedom. With trembling steps, the young monkeys crossed first, followed by the mothers and the elders, each carefully making their way across the Monkey King's back to the safe forest on the other side. Each time a monkey crossed, the weight pressed down on the Monkey King's body, his hands gripping the branches tightly, his body scratched and bleeding, his muscles shaking with the strain. Yet his eyes remained calm, encouraging each monkey to cross with trust and courage. When the last monkey had crossed safely, the Monkey King's strength gave out. His tired body, covered in cuts and bruises, fell into the river below, the current carrying him downstream, his body hitting the rocks along the way. From the other side, King Brahmadatta had witnessed the entire scene. He felt a deep stirring in his heart, seeing the selflessness and love of the Monkey King. Immediately, he ordered his men to rescue the Monkey King from the river and bring him to the shore, laying him gently on a soft cloth and tending to his wounds. King Brahmadatta knelt beside the Monkey King, holding his small, trembling hand, his voice choked with emotion. "Noble monkey, today you have taught me a great lesson. True leadership is not about power or making others obey, but about the courage to sacrifice for the safety and happiness of those you lead." The Monkey King smiled gently, took one last peaceful breath, closed his eyes, and passed away with a heart full of love, free of regret. After finishing the story, the Buddha looked at the monks with compassion in his eyes and said, "Dear monks, the strength of a leader is not in creating fear, but in nurturing love, in sacrificing for others, and in caring deeply for those you guide." This story of the Monkey King is not just an ancient tale. It is one of the Buddha's own past lives, when he practiced the Bodhisattva path, learning to lead with love, patience, and wisdom. It reminds us that you do not need power to lead, nor harshness to guide others. True leadership comes from a compassionate heart, a willingness to listen, and the courage to place the well-being of others before your own. When you live with love, fear dissolves. When you choose kindness and selflessness, your mind becomes spacious, free, and deeply peaceful. One quiet evening at Jetavana Monastery, as the golden light of sunset touched the treetops, a lay follower approached the Buddha and respectfully bowed. "Venerable Buddha," the follower said softly, "in my life, I often feel torn between taking care of myself and helping others. Sometimes, I fear that if I help others, I will lose my freedom or not have enough left for my own family. How can I help others without feeling trapped?" The Buddha looked at the follower with calm, gentle eyes. His presence radiated a deep peace as he replied, "Dear householder, when you fear that compassion will take away your freedom, it means you have not yet understood the true nature of a compassionate heart. In the past, when I was a golden fish, I learned that compassion does not take away your freedom. Compassion is freedom itself." Let me share this story with you. Long ago, in a vast, clear lake where the water was so pure that pebbles could be seen at the bottom and green plants swayed gently with the current, many fish lived together in harmony. Among them was a golden fish, who was none other than the Buddha in one of his past lives. Its scales shimmered like the morning sun, and its kind, bright eyes were always watchful, ready to help the other creatures in the lake. Whenever strong currents swept through the water, the golden fish would swim upstream to find safe paths for the smaller fish. If young fish became tangled in thick underwater plants, the golden fish would gently free them with a flick of its tail. Because of the golden fish's presence, the lake felt safer, and the younger fish would often swim close, comforted by its calm guidance. One year, a harsh dry season came, and the water in the lake began to shrink under the intense heat of the sun. The surface of the water became warm, and the muddy bottom began to appear as the water slowly disappeared. The fish in the lake panicked, swimming frantically to find deeper water. But every corner of the lake was drying up, and the plants began to wither. The smaller fish grew weak from the lack of oxygen, some becoming trapped in small muddy pools, struggling weakly, gasping for life. Seeing this, the golden fish swam throughout the lake, observing the fear and despair in the eyes of the other fish. Its heart ached as it saw the young fish looking up at it with fear and hope. The golden fish knew that if the water disappeared, all would die. Yet it also knew that swimming in fear would save no one. At that moment, the golden fish made a choice. It swam toward the shallow edge of the lake, where villagers came to collect water from a nearby river. Using all its strength, the golden fish leapt out of the water, landing at the feet of a villager who was filling his bucket. The villager was stunned to see a beautiful golden fish shimmering in the sunlight, gently moving in his hands. As he looked into the fish's eyes, he felt it was not just asking for help for itself, but for all the creatures in the drying lake. The villager took the golden fish to the village elder and shared what had happened. Deeply moved by the courage of the fish, the elder gathered the villagers, and together they decided to dig a small channel from the nearby river to the drying lake. Fresh, cool water began to flow into the lake, washing away the mud, bringing back oxygen, and reviving the plants. The water level rose, and the fish that were once struggling began to swim again with renewed life. The young fish saved from certain death. When the lake was full once more, the villager gently returned the golden fish to the water. As it swam beneath the clear surface, the sun shone on its scales, making them sparkle like the light of hope itself. The golden fish had not only saved itself, but had saved the entire lake and all the creatures living within it. After finishing the story, the Buddha looked at the lay follower with gentle eyes and said, "Dear householder, do you see? The golden fish was willing to risk its safety to help others. This act of compassion did not imprison it, but brought life to all, including itself. Compassion does not bind you, it frees you. When your heart is no longer ruled by fear or selfishness, you live in true freedom and peace." This story of the golden fish is not just an old tale, it is one of the Buddha's own past lives, when he practiced the Bodhisattva path, learning to place the well-being of others above his own fear. It reminds us that, when you love and help others, you are not losing your freedom, but expanding your heart. When you act for the benefit of others, you live with a spacious, peaceful mind, free from fear and regret. One gentle morning at Jātaka monastery, as the first rays of sunlight filtered softly through the leaves, a group of lay followers came to the Buddha and respectfully bowed. "Venerable Buddha," one of them said, "it is not easy to care for aging parents. When they are ill, fragile, or easily angered, sometimes we feel tired, frustrated, and wonder if our love is enough. How can we keep our hearts steady in caring for our parents with true compassion?" The Buddha looked at them with kind, serene eyes and replied in a warm, steady voice, "Dear householders, parents are the greatest benefactors in our lives. When love is deep enough, caring for them no longer feels like a burden, but becomes a source of joy and peace. In the past, when I was a son, I learned the power of unconditional love for one's parents. Please, listen carefully to this story. Long ago, in a quiet village by a clear, gentle river, there lived a young man named Sumana, who was none other than the Buddha in one of his past lives. Sumana lived with his elderly mother in a small thatched cottage. His father had passed away long ago, leaving the two of them to care for each other. His mother, who had lost her eyesight when she was young, relied entirely on Sumana for all her needs. Every morning at dawn, as the rooster crowed, Sumana would wake up, light the fire, and prepare warm porridge for his mother. After feeding her, he would head to the fields to work, planting vegetables, carrying water, and doing labor for others to earn enough to buy rice, oil, and medicine for his mother. At night, when the moon rose, Sumana would sit beside his mother, holding her hand and sharing stories of the village, of the birds singing in the trees, of the sun and rain in the fields, helping her feel connected to the beautiful world around her despite her blindness. There were days when Sumana felt exhausted, his shoulders aching from carrying heavy loads of water, his feet sore from working all day. At times, he felt on the verge of collapse, wishing he could rest. But when he saw his mother sitting quietly, her blind eyes turned toward him with gentle trust, his heart would soften, and a tender love would rise within him. He remembered how his mother had sacrificed her youth to raise him, and now he realized that he was her eyes, her strength, and her comfort. One year, a drought struck the village, causing crops to fail and the price of rice to soar. Sumana had to work far away, taking on any job he could find to earn enough money to buy food and medicine for his mother. One day, while carrying water for a wealthy household, Sumana collapsed from exhaustion in the middle of the road. Passers-by urged him to rest and not work himself to death, but Sumana smiled softly and said, "I cannot rest, for my mother is waiting for her morning porridge and the medicine that will ease her pain." The villagers, moved by his devotion, began to help him. Some gave him rice, others brought vegetables, and many shared their kindness so that he could have more time to care for his mother. Thanks to this support, Sumana's life with his mother became a little easier, and even though she was frail, she felt deeply grateful for the love her son showed her every day. One day, Sumana's mother felt her strength fading. She knew her time was near, and she gently held her son's hand, her voice trembling. "My dear son, I have lived long enough, and I am happy because I have had you by my side. You no longer need to worry for me. Live your life now." Sumana held her hand tightly, tears welling in his eyes, and whispered, "Mother, without you, I have no purpose in this world. I live so that you may live in peace." Oh. Hearing these words, his mother smiled, closed her eyes, and passed away peacefully. After his mother's passing, Sumana did not remain in grief for long, for he knew she was at peace and that he had fulfilled his role as a loving son. Sumana continued to live a virtuous life, sharing what he had with those in need, meditating, keeping his mind clear and compassionate, and planting seeds of goodness that would grow throughout many lifetimes. After finishing the story, the Buddha looked at the lay followers and said, "Dear householders, throughout countless lifetimes, I have practiced honoring and caring for my parents as part of my path. When you care for your parents with love, you are planting seeds of goodness, cultivating unconditional compassion, and this brings you peace and freedom within. True love does not demand anything in return. When you care for your parents with your whole heart, you are practicing the deepest form of compassion." This story of the filial son is not merely an old tale. It is one of the Buddha's own past lives, when he practiced loving, patient devotion and unconditional care for his parents as a bodhisattva. It reminds us that parents are the greatest benefactors in our lives. Caring for them is not only a duty but a chance to practice love deeply. When you love your parents unconditionally, you live a meaningful life, planting seeds of goodness and nurturing your heart with peace. One morning at Jetavana Monastery, as dew still clung to the leaves and the gentle songs of birds filled the quiet garden, a young king came to the Buddha and bowed deeply. "Venerable Buddha," he said, "as a ruler, I wish to protect my people and maintain order, but often I must use punishment, firmness, and sometimes even war to keep peace. I am conflicted. How can a king rule with compassion and still keep his kingdom safe?" The Buddha looked at the young king with kind yet wise eyes and replied calmly, "Dear king, ruling with violence creates fear, but ruling with compassion sows lasting peace. Long ago, when I was a king, I learned that true compassion not only brings peace to oneself, but to the entire kingdom. Let me share this story with you. Long ago, in a peaceful kingdom, there lived a wise and kind king named Sivika, who was the Buddha in one of his past lives. King Sivika was known throughout the land for his fairness, humility, and deep love for his people. Each morning, King Sivika would rise early, walking quietly through the palace gardens, listening to the gentle songs of birds and watching the blossoms sway softly in the breeze, allowing his mind to remain calm before attending to the matters of the kingdom. One morning, as the king sat under a great sala tree in his garden, a white dove, its feathers torn and wings stained with blood, flew frantically toward him and landed trembling in his lap, seeking refuge. Moments later, a large hawk swooped down and perched on a branch in front of the king, its sharp eyes fixed on the dove, and then it spoke, empowered by the virtue of the king's pure presence. "Great king," said the hawk, "that dove is my prey. Please return it to me so I may feed myself and survive." King Sivika looked down at the dove, trembling in his hands, then looked up at the hawk, his heart filled with compassion for both creatures. He understood that the dove sought protection, but the hawk also needed food to live. After a moment of quiet reflection, the king spoke gently to the hawk. "My friend, you are right. You need food to survive, but this dove has come to me seeking protection, and I cannot hand it back to you. However, so that you do not go hungry, I will offer you flesh from my own body equal to the weight of this dove." The hawk looked at the king with surprise before nodding in agreement. The king ordered a scale to be brought forth. On one side, he placed the dove, while on the other, he began to place pieces of flesh that he carefully cut from his own thigh. Strangely, no matter how much flesh he placed, the scale remained unbalanced, the dove's side always heavier. the king continued, cutting flesh from his arms and legs, blood dripping onto the earth, yet his face remained calm, his eyes filled with gentle resolve. His attendants were horrified, falling to their knees, pleading with the king to stop, tears streaming down their faces. But King Civica simply smiled at them and said, "If I cannot keep my promise to protect, my compassion loses its strength. I would rather bear this pain than betray a life that has sought my refuge." At last, when the flesh was still not enough to balance the scale, King Civica climbed onto the scale himself, offering his entire body to save the small dove. In that very moment, the earth trembled, and the skies shone with a soft light. The hawk revealed itself to be the heavenly king Saka, who had come to test the compassion of King Civica. Saka bowed deeply before the bleeding king, saying, "Great king, your compassion has surpassed all limits, bringing light to this world. You have taught all beings the true lesson of love and sacrifice." Immediately, the king's body was healed, the wounds vanished, and his body glowed with a soft radiance. The king felt a profound, joyful peace fill his entire being. After finishing the story, the Buddha looked at the young king with calm eyes and said, "In the past, I was King Civica, who learned to rule with compassion, sacrifice, and love. When you protect life and offer refuge to those who seek it, you build a kingdom rooted in peace and trust. Compassion does not weaken a ruler's strength. It brings true respect, harmony, and lasting stability to a nation." This story of King Civica is not merely an ancient tale. It is one of the Buddha's own past lives, during which he practiced compassion and selfless love, protecting even the smallest creatures at great cost to himself. It reminds us that, when you practice compassion, you plant seeds of peace within yourself and around you. When you protect and care for those in fear, your own heart expands and finds deep calm. True love does not make you weak. It is the truest form of strength. One quiet evening at Jetavana Monastery, as the golden light of dusk touched the leaves and a gentle breeze carried the songs of birds, a hunter came to see the Buddha, his face lined with years of hardship, his eyes filled with regret. He bowed deeply and said, "Venerable Buddha, I have lived my whole life as a hunter, taking the lives of many creatures to feed my family. Now, as I grow older, I feel deep remorse for what I have done. At night, I cannot sleep, haunted by the images of the animals I have killed. Please, teach me how I can let go of my past and find peace." The Buddha looked at the hunter with eyes of compassion and firmness and replied, "Dear hunter, when your heart changes, the path of your life changes as well. Long ago, when I was a deer, I witnessed the transformation of a hunter's heart through compassion. Listen carefully to this story. Long ago, in a vast, lush forest filled with the songs of birds and the rustle of leaves, a herd of deer lived peacefully near a clear, flowing stream. Among them was a golden deer with gentle, wise eyes, who was the Buddha in one of his past lives. The golden deer guided the herd to find fresh grass and clean water, protecting the young and the weak from danger, always watchful yet never causing harm. Near this forest lived a hunter named Kassapa, who made his living by hunting deer to sell their meat in the market to support his family. Kassapa was known for his skill. His arrows rarely missed their target. Each morning, he would enter the forest with his bow and arrows, hiding silently in the bushes, waiting to strike as the deer grazed or drank water, paying no mind to the fear in their eyes, focused only on survival and profit. One morning, as Kassapa lay hidden behind a thicket, he saw a magnificent golden deer step out from the trees, its fur shimmering in the morning sun, its posture calm and graceful. Kassapa drew his bow, ready to shoot, but at that very moment, the golden deer turned its head and looked directly at him. There was no fear in its eyes, only calmness and a gentle kindness. Kassapa's hands began to tremble, his arrow slipped and fell to the ground, and his heart pounded with a strange, unfamiliar feeling that brought tears to his eyes. The deer did not run away. It stood there for a moment, looking at Kassapa, then calmly lowered its head to graze before slowly turning and walking back into the forest, leaving Kassapa frozen, his eyes wet, his heart aching. That night, Kassapa could not sleep. The image of the golden deer's peaceful gaze remained in his mind, reminding him of a memory he had buried long ago. His father, also a hunter, had told him on his deathbed, "My son, the karma of taking life is heavy. If you can, leave this path behind and live differently." The next day, Kassapa went into the forest, not to hunt, but to find the golden deer, longing to see its calm eyes again. He found the deer by the stream, drinking water while young deer played nearby, grazing in the soft morning light. As Kassapa stepped forward, the golden deer lifted its head and looked at him once more, the same gentle, fearless gaze meeting his eyes. Kassapa fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face, and he cried out, "Golden deer, I have taken the lives of so many of your kind. I am sorry. I regret all that I have done." The golden deer looked at Kassapa silently for a moment, then lowered its head and calmly walked away, leaving Kassapa there, crying as the cool water of the stream washed over his hands. From that day, Kassapa hung his bow and arrows on the wall and never hunted again. Instead, he began farming, planting vegetables, digging wells for water, living a simple, peaceful life. He started sharing the vegetables he grew with the poor in his village, caring for the sick, helping orphan children, and each morning he would walk into the forest, sit by the stream, listening to the birds, watching the deer graze, feeling a deep peace he had never known before. One morning, Kassapa saw the golden deer standing in the distance. Their eyes met, and Kassapa smiled with gratitude, bowing his head, his heart filled with quiet joy. After telling the story, the Buddha looked at the hunter, who now had tears in his eyes, and said, "Dear hunter, in the past, when I was a deer, I witnessed the transformation of Kassapa's heart through compassion. When your heart changes, your life changes. If you give up taking life and nurture compassion, you will find peace in every breath. There is no sin that cannot be washed away. If you stop, turn back, and choose a new path, you will find freedom and true peace." This story of the hunter and the deer is not merely a legend, it is one of the Buddha's own past lives, during which he practiced compassion and helped transform the hearts of others, planting seeds of kindness that grew into peace. It reminds us that, when you let go of anger and harmful actions, you open the door to a new path for yourself. When you practice compassion, you begin to heal yourself and those around you. No one is beyond change. If you choose to change, you will find true peace. One peaceful afternoon at Jetavana Monastery, as the golden light of sunset softened the trees, an elderly, impoverished man came to see the Buddha. His eyes were tired, carrying the weight of a long, difficult life. He bowed deeply and said, "Venerable Buddha, I have lived my whole life in poverty, always worried about food and clothing, always feeling unlucky and worthless when I see others who have enough. I feel so small, ashamed, and I cannot even look others in the eye. Please, how can I find peace and feel that I have worth in this life?" The Buddha looked at the man with kind, wise eyes and said gently, "Dear householder, true wealth does not come from external possessions but from the richness within your heart. In the past, when I was a beggar, I learned that generosity and mindfulness are the greatest treasures. Please, listen carefully to this story. Long ago, in a prosperous kingdom, there lived a beggar named Surasa, who was none other than the Buddha in one of his past lives. Surasa had been orphaned as a child and had no home or family, wandering the streets each day with an old, cracked alms bowl. People often saw Surasa sitting quietly by the roadside, his bowl before him, his eyes gentle, and a soft smile on his face even when his stomach was empty. One day, Surasa sat beneath a Bodhi tree near the city gates, watching people pass by. He saw wealthy merchants in fine robes, nobles riding in carriages, their faces full of confidence. For a moment, Surasa felt a quiet ache in his heart. If only I could be like them, warm and fed, without begging for each meal, he thought. But then, he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and returned to himself, letting a soft smile touch his lips. I still have my breath, my legs to walk, my eyes to see, and a heart that can love. That means I am already rich. One morning, while walking near the marketplace to seek alms, Surasa noticed a glittering jewel lying in the grass. The jewel sparkled in the sunlight, so beautiful that it could have brought him a fortune. Holding the jewel in his hands, Surasa felt his heart tremble, thinking of warm meals, a small hut, a life without begging. With the jewel in hand, he walked toward the market, hoping to find someone who could buy it, allowing him to live comfortably for the rest of his life. On the way, Surasa saw a merchant sitting by the roadside, his face buried in his hands, weeping. Surasa approached him gently and asked, "Good sir, why are you crying?" Through tears, the merchant replied, "I deal in precious jewels, and I have lost my most valuable gem. Without it, I will lose everything, and my family will fall into ruin." Surasa paused, then quietly asked, "Is this the jewel you have lost?" Surasa held out the shining gem, its light reflecting in the merchant's tear-filled eyes, who gasped in shock and joy. Falling to his knees, the merchant pleaded, "Please, return it to me. I will give you anything you ask for in return." Surasa looked at the jewel, then at the merchant's tearful, desperate face. Smiling softly, Surasa placed the jewel back into the merchant's hands and said, "Take it back. It belongs to you. I do not need anything in return." The merchant was speechless, tears streaming down his face once more, but this time from gratitude rather than despair. Surasa turned and walked away, back to his simple alms bowl, his steps light, his heart brighter than ever. Later, as he sat under the shade of a tree, Surasa closed his eyes and took a deep breath, feeling a profound peace fill him. In that moment, he realized that in giving back the jewel, he had gained something more precious, the joy of freedom, the lightness of an unburdened heart, and the wealth that no gold could ever buy. After finishing the story, the Buddha looked at the elderly man, whose eyes now glistened with quiet tears, and said, "Dear householder, material wealth can be lost, but the wealth of your heart, the freedom within, and the compassion you carry cannot be taken from you. When you know what is enough, you are truly rich. When you let go, you are truly free. When you love, you are truly happy." This story of the beggar and the jewel is not merely an old tale. It is one of the Buddha's own past lives, when he practiced letting go, giving selflessly, and discovering true wealth within. It reminds us that true wealth is not found in possessions, but in the peace and freedom of your heart. Knowing contentment is true richness. Letting go is true happiness. Loving others is the deepest treasure. When you give with love, you plant seeds of peace and joy within yourself. One gentle morning at Jetavana Monastery, as the early sun cast soft golden rays through the leaves, a young man came to the Buddha, bowing deeply, his face weary, his eyes clouded with confusion. He spoke softly, "Venerable Buddha, I have studied many things, read many books, and listened to many teachings, yet I still feel lost and empty. My life feels dark, and I do not know where to go or what to do to find meaning. I feel useless and do not understand why, even with all this knowledge, I am still restless." The Buddha looked at the young man with kind, clear eyes and said gently, "Dear one, knowledge is not the same as wisdom. Hearing many teachings does not mean understanding them. Long ago, when I was a teacher, I learned that only when you apply what you know to your life with mindfulness does knowledge become light. Let me share this story with you. Long ago, in a quiet village by the edge of a forest, there lived a teacher named Kassapa, who was the Buddha in one of his past lives. Kassapa was known throughout the region for his deep understanding, gentle nature, and compassionate heart. He taught children in the village to read, guided adults in living with kindness, and patiently answered anyone who came to him seeking wisdom, treating everyone equally, whether rich or poor. One day, a young man named Rahula came to Kassapa, requesting to be his student. Rahula came from a wealthy family and was intelligent, able to read quickly and remember easily. Within a few months, Rahula had memorized many texts and could recite teachings fluently. Rahula felt proud of himself, often boasting to others about the scriptures he had memorized and frequently arguing with others to prove his superiority. One day, Rahula came to Kassapa, his face filled with pride, and said, "Teacher, I have memorized all that you have taught and read every scripture in your home. Now, I wish for you to teach me something deeper so that I can become the wisest person in the land." Kassapa looked at Rahula and gently asked, "Tell me, Rahula, do you feel happier now with all this knowledge you have gathered?" Rahula paused, his face shifting, his eyes becoming uncertain. I don't know," he admitted. "Lately, I find myself easily angered and restless. I have trouble sleeping and don't understand why I still feel empty." Kassapa stood and invited Rahula to walk with him to the nearby river. The water was clear and calm, reflecting the sunlight in soft ripples. Kassapa pointed to the river and asked, "Do you see the water, Rahula?" Rahula nodded. Kassapa said, "Knowledge is like water. If you only store it in a small cup, it fills quickly, and you feel important. But if you allow it to flow through the fields, nourishing the trees and the earth, it becomes life." Kassapa scooped up a handful of water, then let it flow back into the river, saying softly, "Knowledge that is used only for pride, debate, and proving others wrong will never become wisdom. Only when you live by what you have learned, practicing kindness, patience, and mindfulness, will knowledge turn into wisdom that lights your path and others' paths." From that day, Rahula began to change. He stopped boasting about his knowledge and instead quietly helped other children learn to read, assisted the elderly in carrying water, tended gardens, and used his learning to help those in need. Every evening, Rahula would sit in meditation under a tree, listening to the sounds of the insects, feeling his breath, observing the thoughts of pride and anger that arose within him, learning to smile at them and let them go. Gradually, Rahula felt his heart becoming lighter, his sleep became peaceful, and a gentle radiance returned to his face, replacing the harsh pride that once lived there. One day, Rahula came to Kassapa, his eyes filled with quiet tears, and said, "Teacher, I finally understand. Knowledge is not for showing off but for serving others. Only by living what I learn can I find true peace." Kassapa smiled, placing his hand on Rahula's head, and said, "Well done, Rahula. You have discovered the light of wisdom." After finishing the story, the Buddha looked at the young man, whose eyes now shone more clearly, and said, "Dear one, knowledge is like a lamp, but it can only shine when you light it with mindful breath, love, and true practice. Otherwise, it remains just an object, leaving you in the darkness of your own mind. True wisdom is not in knowing many things but in living what you know, finding peace in your heart, and bringing peace to those around you." This story of the teacher and the student is not merely an ancient tale, it is one of the Buddha's own past lives, when he practiced teaching, nurturing wisdom, and guiding others to live correctly and find true peace. It reminds us that knowledge is not for boasting but for serving and nurturing wisdom. Practicing what you learn is more important than memorizing teachings. Only when you live mindfully with your knowledge do you truly become rich, peaceful, and happy. One quiet evening at Jetavana Monastery, as a soft breeze moved gently through the trees and a crescent moon hung in the sky, an elderly king came to see the Buddha, bowing deeply, his eyes reflecting a lifetime of worry. He spoke softly, "Venerable Buddha, all my life I have ruled my kingdom, protected its borders, and maintained order, yet I am still filled with fear. I fear losing my throne, my power, my health, my life, and I fear conflicts among my children after I am gone. Please, how can I live with a heart that is free from fear?" The Buddha looked at the elderly king with gentle, deep eyes and spoke in a calm, warm voice. "Great king, power cannot remove fear, and wealth cannot buy fearlessness. Only a heart filled with love and understanding can truly be fearless. Long ago, when I was a king, I learned this lesson from a child. Please, listen carefully to this story. Long ago, in a prosperous kingdom, there lived a wise and kind king named Sutasoma, who was the Buddha in one of his past lives. King Sutasoma ruled with compassion, caring for his people and striving to protect justice. Yet, within his heart, he still carried a quiet fear. The fear of invasion, betrayal, illness, and death. At night, he often found it difficult to sleep, walking out onto his balcony to look at the moon, listening to the wind, his heart heavy with unspoken worries. One day, while walking in his garden, the king saw a poor child, dressed in tattered clothes, playing joyfully with butterflies under a tree. The child laughed freely, running and playing without a trace of fear. King Sutasoma watched the child, feeling something shift gently in his heart, and walked over to ask, "My child, are you not afraid of the wild animals in the forest or of people who may harm you?" The child looked up with clear, bright eyes and smiled. "Sir, I am not afraid, because I believe that if I live with kindness and love, the world will protect me. And if I die, I will not be afraid, because I will have lived each day fully." The king stood in silence, watching the child continue to play, the laughter echoing softly, and he felt a small weight lift from his heart. That night, the king could not stop thinking about the child's simple, fearless words. The next day, he invited the child and his mother to the palace. At the palace, the king asked the child, "You have no power, no wealth, so what makes you unafraid?" The child replied, "Your Majesty, I have a mother who loves me, a blue sky above me, the breath in my body, and love in my heart. I do not want fear to take away my joy." Hearing these words, King Suttasoma's eyes filled with tears, and he bowed deeply to the child, saying, "You have taught me something more valuable than anything else." From that day on, King Suttasoma began to meditate each morning, sitting quietly, breathing slowly, listening to the birds, feeling the breeze, letting go of worry with each breath, and smiling with gratitude for each moment. He implemented policies to care for the poor, support the sick, and protect the elderly and orphans. Whenever fear arose, he would remember the child's laughter and return to his breath, gratitude, and love. Gradually, King Suttasoma found himself sleeping peacefully, his face becoming calm, and his eyes brightening with inner peace. Those around him felt the change in his presence, and the kingdom grew in harmony and prosperity. After finishing the story, the Buddha looked at the elderly king, whose eyes now glistened with quiet tears, and said, "Great king, the path to a fearless heart does not come through power but through love and understanding. When you learn to love, to let go, and to live fully with each breath, fear will dissolve. A fearless heart is one that does not fear loss or pain, because it knows that everything is impermanent, and that love and understanding are the true treasures." This story of the king and the child is not merely an old tale, it is one of the Buddha's own past lives, when he learned to release fear by practicing gratitude and love, finding true fearlessness in a heart of compassion. It reminds us, fear arises when we do not understand the impermanence of life. When we live with love and presence, fear loses its power. A fearless heart is not built through power or wealth, but through love and understanding. We look forward to seeing you in the next story. If these stories bring you peace, subscribe to TT-Buddhism and continue your journey of awakening with us each day.